The ballroom sparkled with light. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, scattering golden reflections across the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of roses and champagne, and laughter rolled like music through the room as friends and family celebrated the bride and groom. Every table was filled with animated conversations, couples leaning close, relatives sharing stories, and glasses clinking in toasts. And then there was Claire. She sat slightly off to the side, near a round table that had been set with the same crisp linens and delicate silverware as all the others. Her seat wasn't a cushioned banquet chair. It was her wheelchair, sleek, modern, and carefully chosen to fit her professional image. Most days she wore it like armor, a symbol of strength in a world that underestimated her. But tonight, at this wedding full of pears and promises, the chair felt heavier than ever. Her dark blue dress shimmered under the lights, elegant without being flashy, and her hair was pinned with the kind of precision only someone as disciplined as her could manage. To anyone watching, she looked composed, untouchable, the very picture of the accomplished CEO she was. But beneath that polished exterior, a silence gnawed at her. Claire lifted her champagne glass, though it was still half full. She hadn't taken more than a sip all evening. She smiled politely each time someone passed by. An old colleague who offered a quick, "Good to see you." An aunt of the bride who said, "What a beautiful dress," before rushing away. Every interaction was fleeting, surface level safe. No one lingered. She told herself she didn't mind. After all, she was used to standing, or sitting part. In the boardroom her voice was respected, her decisions decisive, her reputation unshakable. But outside of work, especially in places like this, she always felt like the odd one out. The music shifted, and the bride and groom were invited to the dance floor for their first dance. Guests gathered around, phones raised, faces glowing with joy. Claire watched as the couple moved together, their bodies swaying in perfect sync, love radiating from every glance they exchanged. The sight made her chest tighten, not with envy exactly, but with a kind of aching wistfulness she rarely let herself feel. She thought of the relationships she had let slip past her. There had been a few men who had shown interest, but too often their kindness carried the heavy weight of pity, and she refused to be anyone's charity project. Others admired her career, her ambition, but seemed intimidated by the wheelchair, as though it defined her more than her achievements ever could. So she buried herself in her work, building a company from the ground up, conquering obstacles that would have crushed others. Success had filled her days, but nights like this made her wonder, what had it cost her? Her gaze dropped to her hands resting neatly in her lap. She curled her fingers slightly, grounding herself. The loneliness wasn't new, it was an old companion she had learned to silence with productivity, goals and late nights at the office. Yet weddings had a way of peeling back the layers. They forced her to sit with the reminder that while others found love and built families, she had built walls. Around her, the energy of the room swelled. Couples joined the bride and groom on the dance floor, laughing, spinning, clumsy but joyful. Friends embraced. Children wove between the adults, their giggles floating above the music. The room was alive, buzzing, moving. And Claire sat still. A woman at the next table leaned over and asked politely if the seat beside her was taken. Claire gestured with a small smile for her to go ahead. The woman slid the chair closer to her husband, leaving Claire once again on the edge of the celebration, alone in her own invisible circle. She tried to focus on the beauty of the moment, on the happiness of her friends. She truly was glad for them. The bride had been one of her college roommates, a woman who had stuck by her during her rehabilitation years ago, when life had seemed unbearably heavy. Claire wanted nothing but joy for her. And yet, as she clapped politely for the dancing couple, a thought whispered through her mind. When was the last time someone looked at me like that? Like I was their whole world? Her throat tightened, and she forced a breath through it, determined not to let the emotion rise too high. She had mastered control after all. But no amount of discipline could keep away the image of herself, as she must appear now the successful woman in the wheelchair, admired but untouchable, present but alone. The waiter passed by, offering another pour of champagne. Claire shook her head gently, murmuring a quiet, "No thank you." The bubbles in her glass had already gone flat, much like her evening. She shifted slightly in her chair, angling herself toward the dance floor, as though proximity could bridge the distance she felt. For a brief moment, her eyes caught the bride's, a radiant, glowing smile framed with joy. The bride mouthed a silent thank you across the room, gratitude for Claire's presence, for her unwavering support. Claire smiled back, genuine but fleeting, because when the gaze broke, she was left with her reflection once more, a poised figure sitting alone at a wedding table, surrounded by joy that felt just out of reach. The music swelled again, the lights dimmed slightly, and couples continued to fill the floor. Claire rested her chin lightly on her hand, her expression composed for the world to see. Inside though, the silence echoed, and that's when a small voice across the room asked, "Daddy, why is that pretty lady sitting all by herself?" Claire didn't hear it yet. But the question was already in the air, already weaving its way toward her life in a way she could never have anticipated. At the opposite side of the ballroom, away from the polished dance floor and glittering chandeliers, Daniel adjusted the bow tie that had already begun to feel too tight around his neck. He was never one for tuxedos. His usual uniform was grease-stained coveralls and a baseball cap, working 12-hour shifts at the auto shop. Tonight though, he'd done his best, shaved, ironed his shirt, even polished the old dress shoes he hadn't worn since his sister's wedding years ago. But no matter how carefully he dressed, he still felt out of place. The wedding guests around him carried an air of wealth and prestige, lawyers, entrepreneurs, high-ranking managers. Daniel wasn't ashamed of who he was, but it was hard not to feel like he was on the outside looking in. The only reason he was here at all was because the groom was his childhood friend, someone who had insisted that Daniel and his little girl, Lily, come celebrate. Lily was the reason Daniel could face nights like this without retreating. She was 7, bright-eyed, and endlessly curious about the world. Tonight she wore a cream-colored dress with a satin bow that matched the flower crown perched slightly crooked on her head. She had been the flower girl earlier in the ceremony, scattering petals with the same joyful seriousness she gave to coloring books and bedtime stories. Now she twirled in the open space near their table, spinning until the hem of her dress fanned out like a bell. "Careful, kiddo," Daniel called with a grin as she nearly toppled over. "I'm a ballerina, Daddy," she declared, regaining her balance and striking a pose with arms stretched high. Her giggles rang out pure and free, cutting through the hum of adult conversations. Daniel shook his head, chuckling, though a pang of tenderness swelled in his chest. Lily was his whole world. Ever since her mother had walked away when Lily was still a toddler, life had been a series of uphill climbs, diapers, daycare costs, long nights at work to keep food on the table. Some nights he had felt the crushing weight of exhaustion, the loneliness of raising a child alone. But then Lily would look up at him with those wide, trusting eyes and say, "I love you, Daddy," and somehow the strength to keep going would return. As the music shifted into a romantic ballad, Daniel's gaze swept across the room. Everywhere he looked, couples leaned into each other, hands clasped, laughter exchanged like precious secrets. It was beautiful, he supposed, but also bittersweet. He hadn't been on a date in years. His life didn't allow much room for it. Even when he tried, most women backed away the moment they realized his time and heart belonged first to Lily. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way. Still, he couldn't deny the quiet ache of missing companionship. It was then that Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy." "Yeah, bug." He bent down so they were eye level. She tilted her head toward the far side of the room, where Claire sat in her wheelchair. "Why is that pretty lady sitting all by herself? Doesn't she have a date?" Daniel followed her gaze. The woman in blue looked elegant and poised, but there was something in her expression, a stillness, a loneliness, that struck him. He recognized it because he had felt it himself, sitting at gatherings like this watching life swirl around him without ever being part of it. "I don't know, sweetheart," he answered softly. "She looks sad," Lily whispered, her little brow furrowing. Then in her decisive, childlike way, she added, "We should sit with her. No one should sit alone at a party." Daniel's first instinct was to smile at her innocence. But then the thought settled deeper. She was right. No one should sit alone. And wasn't he always telling Lily to be kind, to notice people others overlook? Maybe this was one of those moments where he needed to follow her lead. He hesitated only a second longer, adjusting his jacket nervously. The woman looked important, someone with a commanding presence even while sitting quietly. What if she didn't want company? What if she thought he was intruding? But then Lily gave his hand an insistent tug, and Daniel remembered that courage didn't always mean being fearless. It sometimes meant doing something small but meaningful. "All right, bug," he said finally, rising to his feet. "Let's go say hi." Hand in hand, they began walking across the room. Daniel noticed how the woman's posture straightened slightly as they drew closer, as though bracing herself for another passing interaction. He could almost imagine what she was expecting, a polite word, maybe a compliment, and then the familiar withdrawal that left her alone again. But Daniel wasn't planning to pass by. As they reached the table, Lily let go of his hand and skipped forward, her flower crown slipping further over one ear. "Hey," she chirped brightly. Claire blinked, momentarily startled by the small voice. Her polite smile softened at the sight of the little girl. "Hello," she said warmly. "Don't you look beautiful?" Lily giggled, twirling again to show off her dress. "I was the flower girl. Did you see me?" "I did," Claire replied, her eyes lighting up despite herself. "You were wonderful." Daniel stepped forward then, giving Claire an easy, respectful smile. "She insisted we come over, said no one should sit alone at a party." His tone was gentle, not pitying, just straightforward. "Mind if we keep you company for a bit?" For a moment, Claire hesitated. She was so used to people rushing in and out of her space, keeping things surface level, that the genuine offer of company caught her off guard. But as she looked at the man standing before her, tall, kind-eyed, clearly a little nervous, she sensed no condescension, no agenda, just sincerity. "I'd like that," she said quietly. and with that simple exchange the invisible wall around her began to crack. For the first time that evening, Claire didn't feel invisible. Daniel slid into the empty chair beside her, while Lily immediately climbed onto the seat on Claire's other side, her small legs swinging happily. It was as if they had claimed her table as their own without hesitation, filling the silence that had weighed so heavily only moments before. Claire smoothed her dress nervously, not out of discomfort but out of surprise. She had grown so used to polite greetings that went nowhere. She hadn't expected anyone, let alone a stranger and his little girl, to truly join her. "Thank you for letting us crash your table," Daniel said with a lopsided smile. "We were running out of space at ours, and Lily was convinced this was the best spot in the room." Lily leaned closer to Claire, whispering loudly, "It is the best, you can see everything from here." Claire chuckled, the sound genuine and light. "You're absolutely right, this is the perfect view." She gestured toward the dance floor where the newlyweds were swaying together, "Especially for watching the most important part." Lily sighed dramatically. "It looks like a fairy tale. Do you think the princess always dances with the same prince?" Claire's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "If she's lucky, yes, but sometimes," she added softly, "the princess doesn't even realize the right prince is standing right in front of her until later." Daniel caught the quiet weight in her words. For a moment, their eyes met. Claire looked away first, not used to being seen so closely. To shift the moment, Daniel asked, "So, do you know the bride or groom?" "The bride," Claire answered, her voice steady but warm. "We were roommates in college. She was the kind of friend who stuck by me during the hardest times. I couldn't imagine missing today." "That's special," Daniel said, sincerity in his tone. "She's lucky to have someone like you here." Claire studied him for a moment, curious. Most people tiptoed around her wheelchair, careful not to say the wrong thing. But Daniel's voice carried no awkwardness, no forced cheer, just respect. It disarmed her. Meanwhile, Lily had already taken charge of the conversation. "My daddy fixes cars," she announced proudly. "Can fix anything, even our toaster." Daniel laughed under his breath. "Well, not anything. That toaster didn't make it, but you tried," Lily insisted. She turned back to Claire. "What do you do?" Claire hesitated, wondering how much to share. People often reacted to her career with either admiration that felt shallow or surprise that bordered on disbelief. But Lily's earnest curiosity was different. "I run a company," Claire said simply. The little girl's eyes went wide. "Like a boss." "Exactly like a boss." Lily gasped and clapped her hands. "That's so cool, Daddy, she's a real boss lady." Daniel grinned, looking at Claire. "Wes, that makes you the most important person at this table." Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest at his easy humor. She hadn't expected to laugh tonight, but somehow, sitting with this father and daughter, it felt natural. As the music shifted again, the DJ announced another slow song. Couples began drifting back onto the dance floor, their movements tender, some clumsy, all full of joy. Claire's smile dimmed slightly. Dancing was the one tradition that always felt firmly close to her. She had attended countless weddings, always clapping politely from the sidelines, never part of the movement. And then Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. "You know," he said, leaning just slightly closer, "I'm not much of a dancer myself. 2 left feet, really. But I was thinking," he hesitated, his gaze steady but kind, "would you be my date on the dance floor?" Claire blinked. She was sure she'd misheard. "What?" Daniel gave a small shrug, like it was the most natural suggestion in the world. "We could make our own kind of dance. Doesn't have to look like theirs. Just has to feel like ours." Her first instinct was to laugh it off, to retreat into the safety of polite refusal. "I don't think." But Lily interrupted, clapping her hands. "Yes, let's all dance." "Please, Miss Boss Lady." Claire's heart raced. The idea terrified her. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked. She imagined the eyes of the entire room turning toward her, imagined whispers, imagined pity. The walls she had spent years building threatened to rise again. Yet Daniel's expression was steady, patient. There was no pity in his eyes, no hesitation, only a quiet invitation. He wasn't asking to prove a point, he was asking to share a moment. Claire swallowed hard. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Daniel said. "If you'll trust me." Something inside her softened. For years, she had trusted only herself. But tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to believe in this man's sincerity. Slowly, almost shyly, she placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, grounding. Daniel stood and gently positioned himself behind her chair. "All right," he said with a grin. "Let's show them how it's done." Claire's stomach fluttered nervously, as he wheeled her toward the dance floor, Lily skipping alongside, her flower crown now entirely askew. Claire's mind screamed at her to stop, to retreat, to stay safe in her corner. But her heart, for the first time in years, told her to move forward. And so, together, they entered the glow of the dance floor, ready to create something entirely their own. The dance floor stretched before Claire like a stage she had never dared to step onto. The chandeliers above spilled golden light across the polished floor, where couples already swayed in each other's arms, lost in the music. The melody of the ballad floated through the air, soft piano chords, the gentle rise of violins, the steady beat of drums that pulsed like a heartbeat. And then there was Claire rolling forward slowly in her chair, guided by Daniel's steady hands. Her pulse pounded. Every instinct told her to stop, to turn back, to retreat to the safety of her corner. She imagined all the eyes turning toward her, imagined whispers blooming like shadows. Why is she here? This isn't her place. How awkward, how sad. But then she felt Daniel's presence behind her, not pushing, not leading, just steady, reassuring, like a promise she didn't know she needed. Beside her, Lily skipped along, completely unbothered by the formality of the moment. "We're gonna dance, Daddy," she squealed, spinning in circles as the hem of her dress flared. A ripple passed through the crowd as people began to notice. Heads turned, conversations faltered. Slowly, the couples on the edge of the floor began to pause, their eyes drawn to the unlikely trio making their way into the center. Claire's breath caught. She hated the spotlight when it wasn't on her terms. She wanted to disappear. But then Daniel leaned down, his voice just for her. "Don't look at them. Look at me." She glanced up, startled, and found his eyes warm, steady, unflinching. There was no pity there, only encouragement, only respect. "Ready?" he asked softly. Her throat tightened, she gave the smallest nod, and then the music wrapped around them. Daniel stepped in front of her, holding out his hand. Claire hesitated, then placed her palm in his. He guided her gently, not pulling, not leading in the way traditional dance demanded, but moving in sync with her chair. He shifted side to side with the rhythm, his steps slow, deliberate, matching the flow of the music. Claire moved her wheels ever so slightly, turning and gliding, finding a rhythm of her own. It wasn't a waltz or a foxtrot, it was something else entirely, something theirs. Lily joined in with wild abandon, twirling and clapping to the beat, giggling when her flower crown nearly tumbled off her head. She grabbed Claire's free hand at one point and spun herself under it, crowing, "Ta-dow," as if they were in the middle of a grand performance. The room, once buzzing with chatter, grew still. People stopped mid-step, mid-conversation, mid-laugh. They watched as the woman in the wheelchair, the single dad with his clumsy steps, and the little girl with crooked flowers created a dance that defied every expectation. At first, Claire felt the weight of their stares pressing down on her, but then something shifted. She saw not judgment, not pity, but awe. She felt it in the way the air in the room seemed to soften, in the way smiles began to spread across faces, in the way people leaned forward as though they were witnessing something sacred. And then, for the first time in years, she laughed, really laughed. The sound surprised her, light, unrestrained, bubbling up from somewhere deep she had almost forgotten existed. Daniel's grin widened at the sound. "See," he teased, his voice playful. "Told you we'd make our own dance." Claire's heart clenched in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She wasn't just part of the dance, she was the dance. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't defined by her chair. She was a woman alive in the moment, seen, cherished, celebrated. Lily, still twirling, shouted, "Everybody clap." Her voice rang out, and as if the room had been waiting for the command, applause erupted. First a few hands, then the entire hall filled with clapping, cheers, even whistles. The energy surged like a wave, wrapping around them in thunderous approval. Claire's eyes stung with sudden tears. She turned her head slightly, overwhelmed. Daniel noticed immediately. "Hey," he murmured, lowering his head so she could hear him. "Don't cry. Not tonight. You're beautiful out here." The words struck deep, not because of how he said them, but because he meant them. She could feel it. By now the music had carried them into the heart of the song. The notes swelled, violins soaring, drums pulsing louder. Daniel, still moving with quiet confidence, gave her hand a playful spin, guiding her chair in a gentle circle. Lily clapped her hands in delight. "She's twirling." Claire laughed through her tears, allowing herself to surrender to the moment. She let the music guide her, let Daniel's steady presence anchor her, let Lily's joy remind her of something she had long forgotten, the sheer beauty of being fully alive. Around them, guests wiped at their eyes, some holding their partners closer, some whispering to each other about what they were seeing. Even the bride and groom stood at the edge of the floor, hands clasped, tears glimmering in the bride's eyes. It wasn't just a dance anymore, it was a statement, a revelation, a reminder that love, joy, and connection were not bound by circumstance, by tradition, by what others expected. When the final notes of the song faded, the applause did not. It grew louder, rising to a standing ovation. People cheered, clapped, whistled, some even stomping their feet in rhythm. Claire sat breathless, her chest heaving with laughter and tears, her heart fuller than it had been in years. Daniel leaned close, his hand still holding hers. "Told you we'd stop the room," he said with a grin. Claire shook her head, her voice breaking with emotion. "No, you started it, I just followed." Lily, completely oblivious to the weight of the moment, tugged at Claire's arm. "Can we do it again, please?" Claire let out a shaky laugh, brushing at the tears on her cheeks. "I think I'd like that." As the three of them left the dance floor together, hand in hand, the applause still echoing behind them, Claire realized something profound. She had stepped into this evening certain it would remind her of everything she lacked. Instead, it had shown her something she hadn't dared to hope for. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't broken. She was seen, valued, and maybe, just maybe, on the cusp of something entirely new. The applause was still echoing as Claire, Daniel, and Lily stepped off the dance floor. It followed them like a wave, a current of warmth that seemed to wrap itself around Claire's shoulders. She felt lightheaded, not from nerves as she had expected but from joy. A joy she hadn't felt in years, one that made her laugh so hard her cheeks ached and left her blinking away tears she hadn't planned on shedding. They returned to her table, but something had shifted. The small round table that had felt like a lonely island just an hour ago now felt like the very heart of the room. Guests nodded at her as she passed, some clapping her on the shoulder, others whispering words of admiration. She wasn't sure she heard them all clearly, but the expressions on their faces told her enough respect, not pity. Daniel pulled her chair in gently, his hand lingering for a moment on the backrest as though grounding her once more. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Claire met his gaze. There was concern in his eyes, but also something more, something steady and genuine. She nodded, her voice catching. "I'm better than okay." Lily plopped into her seat with a triumphant grin. "That was the best dance ever. Did you see everyone clapping? They loved us." Claire laughed, shaking her head. "I think they loved you, Lily." "Nope," the little girl said matter-of-factly, stuffing a cupcake into her mouth. "They loved us." Daniel chuckled, reaching over to wipe frosting from his daughter's cheek. Then he looked at Claire again, his voice softer now. "You know, for what it's worth, you changed something in that room tonight." The Claire tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Everyone came here expecting the usual wedding stuff. Dancing, cake, laughter. But when you rolled out onto that floor, you reminded people what this is all really about: joy, courage, love, in all its forms. You made people see, including me." The words sank deep, settling in places she had long ignored. For years, she had believed her wheelchair defined the boundaries of her life. What was possible, what wasn't. She had fought to prove her worth in boardrooms, in business deals, in the eyes of skeptics. But tonight, for the first time, she had been seen not as a CEO, not as a woman in a chair, but simply as a human being capable of joy. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick, "for asking me, for not treating me like." She trailed off, unable to finish. Daniel didn't make her. He just gave her a small smile, his hand brushing hers briefly. "I didn't ask you because I felt sorry for you. I asked because I wanted to. Because you deserve to be out there as much as anyone else." Her chest tightened. No, she did believe him. There was no hesitation in his voice, no patronizing kindness, just truth. Lily interrupted then, climbing halfway onto Claire's lap as though she had always belonged there. "You're my new friend," she announced confidently. "Can we see you again after this?" Claire blinked, caught off guard. Her heart swelled at the child's innocence, her willingness to claim connection so easily. "I'd like that," she said softly, looking at Daniel as she spoke. Daniel's smile widened, though he glanced down almost shy. "Would like that too." The music shifted again, louder now as the DJ invited everyone to the floor for a faster song. The hall filled with motion once more, dresses spinning, shoes tapping, voices raised in laughter. But at their small table, time seemed to slow. Claire studied Daniel quietly. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his tie crooked, his shoes scuffed. He didn't look like the polished executives she often met at charity galas or board meetings. But there was something in his presence, strength, humility, kindness, that drew her in more powerfully than any sleek suit or smooth words ever had. And then there was Lily, giggling with a mouth full of frosting, leaning against her as if they'd known each other forever. For years, Claire had told herself she didn't need a family, didn't need a partner, that her career, her independence, her resilience were enough. Tonight, she realized she hadn't been avoiding family life because she didn't want it. She had been avoiding it because she was afraid it would never want her. But here, at this wedding she had expected to endure in solitude, she found herself drawn into something unexpected, not romance exactly, not yet, but possibility, the possibility of connection, of belonging, of love. The bride appeared then, radiant in her gown, wrapping Claire in a sudden embrace. "That was beautiful," she whispered fiercely. "You made me cry." Claire laughed, wiping at her own eyes. "You and me both." The bride glanced between her and Daniel, her smile knowingly mischievous. "You two looked incredible out there." The Claire blushed, glancing away, but Daniel only chuckled. "She made me look good," he said. After the bride flitted away again, swept into the chaos of the reception, the three of them lingered at the table, sharing stories, laughter, little moments of unexpected intimacy. Claire told Lily about the time she accidentally wore mismatched shoes to a meeting with investors. Daniel told Claire about the time Lily convinced him to host a tea party, with plastic cups and motor oil cans for seats. The night stretched on, but instead of loneliness pressing in, Claire felt something new blooming in her chest: hope. As the evening drew to a close and guests began gathering coats, Daniel leaned toward her, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. Listen, I don't want to be too forward, but would you like to meet us for ice cream sometime? There's this little shop Lily and I go to every Friday. Best Sundays in town. Claire's breath caught. She hadn't been asked on a date, in longer than she cared to admit. But there was no pressure in his words, no expectation, just an invitation. She smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. I'd love that. Daniel's grin spread wide, genuine and relieved. Lily clapped her hands as if they'd just announced a holiday. Yes! Ice cream with Miss Boss Lady! Claire laughed, shaking her head. I guess I have a new name now. As the three of them made their way out of the hall together, Lily skipping ahead, Daniel walking at her side, Claire rolling smoothly between them, she felt something stir deep inside. It wasn't just the memory of the dance or the kindness of one man and his daughter. It was the realization that her story wasn't over, that her life still held chapters unwritten. Tonight had started with isolation and ended with connection, with possibility, with a reminder that even when you feel invisible, love has a way of finding you when you least expect it. And as the cool night air met her face outside the venue, Claire whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, maybe this is just the beginning.